All right. So thank you, Administrator Senator Nelson. I very much appreciate what you're able to do for the organization and your leadership as we move forward into the Artemis generation. Well, our next panel is on some of that. It's actually on the very first thing he talked about, and that's the Artemis Deep Space Gateway. We have not had very much attention to it recently because of differing things getting higher in the public view, but the Artemis Deep Space Gateway is key to our plans for the moon and for Mars. So we've got a great session. Very much thanks to our sponsors for this session, Aerojet Rocketdyne and Maxar. They are sponsoring this session, and so thank you guys very, very much for this. I'd like to bring up our moderator for this panel, Sean Fuller, who is the International Partner Manager, Gateway Program at NASA. Sean, introduce your panel, please, and take it away.
Great. Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Thank you, Alan. It's certainly a pleasure and honor to be here with you today. And with this great panel I have as well, we're going to give you some updates on where we are with Gateway and what we're doing to make that possible, sustained exploration of the Artemis program. So let me introduce the esteemed panel we have representing NASA's commercial and international partners from around the world. Myself, I'm the International Partner Manager for the Gateway program at NASA at the Johnson Space Center. Joining me today is Mr. Scott Tilley from Maxar Technologies as the PP Program Chief Architect. From our European Space Agency, Mr. Frank De Winne. He is the ISS Program Manager at ESA. From Northrop Grumman, Ms. Sally Richardson, the HALO Senior Program Director. And from our JAXA colleagues, and certainly appreciate joining given the hour of the day as well, Mr. Fumiya Tsutsui-san. He is the Program Manager for Gateway from JAXA. So I look forward to giving you an update today on where we are with Gateway, the hardware as it moves along, and how Gateway is going to support us for sustainable exploration of both the moon and a stepping off point to Mars. Just as an introduction, a couple of charts. So if we could pull up my charts, please. So Gateway, as I mentioned, it is going to be, obviously, Gateway is humanity's first outpost in a sustained lunar orbit. So we're going to take what we've learned on ISS and low Earth orbit with our partnerships and our commercial entities as well, and expand that out into the lunar orbit and really expand humanity's presence there as that point where we can move on for exploration to the lunar surface and beyond out to Mars in the future. And so that will be our base camp, if you will, for expanding out, made possible through the efforts of all the folks you see here today, as well as many others around the world. So if we can go to the next chart, please, just a quick pictorial graph of what that is from each of the areas. I mentioned Gateway is possible thanks to the participation of our partners. As you see the different elements, and we'll hear updates on many of these here in a little bit. But as an aggregation point, Gateway is key to that exploration as a point where Orion comes up with the 4 crew, quarters for the crew to get ready and then get into a lander, go down to the surface activities on the lunar surface, and also as a unique platform in what we call the NRHO orbit around the moon. We now have a permanent platform there. It's in a different environment for a lot of research. It will begin with the first element launches of Gateway. So it's really going to enable us to do a lot of that exploration we talk about, do it in an efficient and a sustained manner as we really expand humanity's touch from beyond low Earth orbit to a permanent presence farther out. So look forward to hearing updates from each of our panelists today. And so let's go ahead and jump into those. And I think we'll hear first from Scott, the exciting work going on the PPE of our first elements that'll be launched to Gateway.
Thank you for the introduction. Yeah, I'd love to talk about PPE. If you could bring up the slides. So I'm Scott Tilley. I am the Chief Architect and Chief Engineer at Maxar on the Power and Propulsion element. I'm filling in for Vince Bellardo, our Senior Executive Program Director. He is at one of our critical suppliers today. It'll be a supplier for our ROSA, our rollout solar array, and I'll tell you a little bit more about that. But let's go ahead and get right into the slides we have. So if we can please go to the first slide. So one of the critical parts of developing a sustainable platforms in space is related to propulsion. And solar electric propulsion is the most efficient means we have right now for large transport applications. And so both NASA and Maxar have been heavily involved in developing advanced capabilities. And so I'm going to talk a little bit about that critical path of what we call from sun to thrust. So from solar power coming in to propulsive thrust being generated by the engines. And so NASA has been funding and sponsoring developments to advance the state of the art in solar arrays and also in electric propulsion systems and thrusters. And Maxar has been involved in that also. So what I've shown here is the some of the key elements. If you look over on the left-hand side, you start with the power coming in through the solar array. Then it's going to go into our power conditioning and distribution system, and then go into the power processing electronics directly before the thruster. And then the thruster itself will turn that energy plus a fuel from xenon into thrust. And by developing these systems for commercial applications, we built a big heritage of spacecraft flying these and understanding the way these systems operate. It is an integrated system. There's power, thermal, guidance control, propulsion aspects all tied together in these systems. But Maxar has 40 spacecraft flying right now, which use 160 of these thrusters. And we have about 160,000 hours of firing time accumulated in space. So we've got a good foundational point to move off for PPE. As you move across the chart from left to right, you can see that we've been using these blocks to scale up the capability of the system. And we're currently flying our second generation, the middle column there, using SPT-140s, and we're moving into this third generation right now. I should mention that the SPT-140s are powering the NASA JPL Psyche mission out to the asteroid. And then, of course, I want to talk about PPE, which is going to use these third generation systems. So starting with the solar array, very large solar arrays for PPE to generate about 60 kilowatts on orbit. And these will be rollout solar arrays. So they are lightweight and compact in stowage. And they're very scalable up to much higher power systems. So PPE is a really good demonstration point for these systems that are going to further space exploration. Similarly, scaling up the power processing electronics to provide 6 to 12 kilowatts of power into the thrusters is another development effort that's going on in PPE, again, based on some building blocks that Maxar has already developed. And then at the bottom, you see the two classes of thrusters that are on PPE. There is a 6 kilowatt thruster that Maxar has been developing with Busick. And then there is the Advanced Electric Propulsion System thruster, AEPS thruster, that NASA and Aerojet have been producing. So these systems play complementary roles on PPE, and they also allow us to scale in different directions, both for lower power applications that maybe would be used for geocomsats, but also up into much higher power classes, 200 to 300 kilowatt class spacecraft that might be used for deep space transportation. If we can go on to the next slide. So just as an example of something that's been going on with our partners at Busick, we've been developing this 6 kilowatt thruster, and we've just completed a set of hot fired tests with integrated thrusters and power processing electronics. And these development tests are critical for proving out, reliable flight operations. And so there's always lessons learned. We went through it. We found some things that we wanted to improve upon in the thruster and the power processing units. But we were able to demonstrate stable, robust performance across a range of voltages and power levels for these thrusters, which is what we want to do on PPE. There are similar tests being done also on the AEPS thruster by NASA Glenn. And we're getting more information all the time on how these are going to work in the whole end-to-end system. So this is, again, is a very positive development. Next slide, please. So again, in our power systems that are going to feed these solar electric propulsion systems, we're continuing to make good progress on PPE. We have developed solar power modules, or SPMs, which are the building blocks for our rollout solar array. We have about 800 of these modules spread across the 2 wings, and those are in full-scale production right now, and we've been receiving those. Also, similarly, we have 4 large batteries, lithium-ion batteries. Again, this is Maxar heritage, and we have many of those flying in orbit already. And these batteries are being assembled, and we've already received several of them. So this is coming along, and they will be providing battery power when we're in eclipse or other operations where we might have to supplement a little bit of power in sunlight, but primarily they're there for eclipse operations. So this is part of the sun to thrust is continuing to be built up in the PPE design and development, and we're making good progress on that. So if we can go to the last chart. So again, just in terms of the progress we're making and where we're going, we started in the middle of 2019. We've completed a couple of system requirements reviews. We've completed a phase 0 safety review. We just completed a PDR1. You may say, well, why is it a PDR1? Well, since we started this program, PPE's program has evolved, just like Gateway has evolved. And we are now part of the co-manifest vehicle. And you'll hear more about HALO being launched together with PPE. So that was a change that we had to run everything to ground to make sure that the 2 systems could fly together, and they can. We found no issues there. So we're continuing to work on that development of PPE in relation to the CMV mission itself. So we do expect that we will have a second PDR to close out on some new requirements, followed by a CDR next year, and then development of the spacecraft, the build, the test, and delivery to the launch base in 2024 for the mission itself. There's some other items shown here, but PPE is out moving along. We have virtually all the hardware on order right now, and some is actually, as I said, is being delivered right now. And we will continue to work on this, and because this is part of our 1300 heritage, any experiences that we have from our 90 satellites in orbit will be things that we learn from and can also adjust and make note of in the PPE operations as well. But that's the status, and thank you very much for letting me share this with you.
Thank you, Scott. It's really fascinating to see and the evolution of the technology as we head into Gateway. And it's always great to see flight hardware and the testing going on. So certainly a lot of progress happening in PPE that looks wonderful. Let's move on now to our European colleagues and Mr. Frank de Winne for a status from the European elements.
Thank you very much, Sean. Good morning, good afternoon, everybody. So you have seen from the view graph, the overview of Sean, that ESA is indeed contributing quite a number of elements to the Gateway. I'm actually here presenting on behalf of Mr. Nico Detman, who is our Gateway program manager, but unfortunately could not be with you today. But I've been part of the initial discussions, at least up till the Gateway program was formed together with the colleagues from NASA, Sean, and CSA, Ken, and Tsutsuwe-san. So welcome, colleagues, here. Next slide, please. So this pictorial is already there, a little bit shown by Sean, but besides the main elements which we will talk about today, ESA is also providing a number of scientific and technology payloads. Some of them that will fly on the PPE and that will characterize actually the radiation environment of this new orbit that we are flying in. So as Sean said, we are looking forward, of course, to the capabilities that Gateway will bring, but also to the science that it will bring and new knowledge that it will bring to the partnership. Next, please. So the status, one of the first elements that we will fly is the IHAB, the International Habitation module of the Gateway. It provides a habitable system and volume that can sustain human life throughout the duration of the mission of the Gateway. But it also provides docking ports for the Orion, namely the crew that will arrive, but could also be the lunar lander or other logistics modules. So docking capability is one of the main capabilities that this module also will provide. It will also provide heat rejection, additional heat rejection for the overall Gateway, which is also important because, of course, we need to keep the balance there, thermal balance of the entire system. And then, as already said, we will provide resources for pressurized and unpressurized scientific experiments. Last but not least, we also will need to be able to maintain the Gateway for a long time, as we have learned from the ISS program. And I think the robotics capabilities that will be delivered by our colleagues from Canada, and I'm sure Ken will talk about that, will be key to the maintainability of the Gateway. And so, of course, we are also providing then the necessary support for the Gateway robotic arm. Next, please. Where are we today? Thales Alenia Space is the prime contractor for the IHAB. They have a lot of experience in building habitats and pressurized volumes for the ISS. And so we are leveraging on that, of course. But the IHAB, as it stands for International Habitat, is not only an ESA contribution, it also has contributions from NASA for some common equipment, some software, but also the launch will be co-manifested with an Orion. Our colleagues from JAXA, and Susan will certainly talk about that, will provide the life support systems for the IHAB and also some batteries and some pumps. CSA will provide all the EVR interfaces and the needed processes for the IHAB. So we're looking at about 10 tons at launch, 3-meter diameter, so it's smaller than ISS elements. This is important if we talk, of course, about the accommodations for the crew, and certainly if we, like Sean says, we'll look forward to the Gateway as well to do longer-term exploration missions, for example, for all the exercise equipment and the medical support that we need to provide to the crew. 4 docking ports, and then, okay, you can read here on the slide some internal and external accommodation slots for the science. The schedule, we just finished the PDR. I would say it's partly successful. A lot of progress was being made by industry, but as we are at the start of the Gateway program, of course, a lot of the program requirements itself are still a little bit in evolution and flux. So we will have to do a Delta PDR somewhere in the fall of this year, so that we can close out all the necessary actions. We foresee a CDR in Q3 of 2023 and for a launch in the mid-2026. Next, please. So the other system that we are providing is the HALO Lunar Communications System, the HLCS. That's actually the system that will launch first. Here, Thales Alenia Space France is our prime contractor. They have a lot of experience in communication systems, especially for communication satellites in GEO. The system here has passed the PDR already, and basically HLCS will provide 4 of the 5 data links between the gateway and the lunar surface. As Sean has mentioned, one of the main goals of the gateway is to allow sustainable lunar surface exploration. So communications, of course, with the crew on the surface and with the assets on the surface, can also be robotic assets, will be key. So the intent is indeed to support human and robotic exploration, and it could also communicate with other vehicles that come in closer proximity to the gateway, because also, as we have learned from the ISS, I think, we can see today on the pictograms what the gateway looks like, but God knows how it will look like and what we will do with it in 20 years from now. So flexibility and increasing capabilities is key for me if you start this type of endeavors. It can do also autonomous search and tracking, and it has some ranging capability. So the launch will today not be earlier than November 2024. That is where we're planning for the Esprit, but the system is well on track. Next, please. The other part of the Esprit is the European refueling module. We just heard from our colleagues of Maxar how electrical propulsion will be key, and of course propulsion in general for any exploration capability is key. And as we have also learned from the ISS, refueling in this aspect is also a key capability. So this is something that ESA will provide with refueling capabilities, both for the 800 kilograms bipropellant, so the classical propulsion systems, I would say, and 8 kilogram of xenon for the electrical propulsion provided by our colleagues of Maxar. It can also be further refueled by a tanker. So here again, we are looking at the long-term future of the gateway and of Esprit. And it's planned today that it will also have an aft docking port for connecting visiting vehicles to the rest of the gateway. It also has a viewing capability, which you can see there. As a former astronaut, I can only say how important it is that from time to time you can look out of the window. So this was a capability that was added quite late, I would say, in the gateway architecture when we were discussing it. But I'm very pleased that we will have this capability. As discussed before, it's still a lot of the things are still in evolution. Our colleagues from Maxar told it that they are now co-manifested with the Halo. The same thing, the ERM is now under review for being co-manifested with the Orion, which could give us an extra 2,000 kilogram of launch mass. And then we are currently discussing with NASA how we can best use this additional launch mass by enlarging probably the volume, having some additional logistics, and providing extra capabilities to the gateway. So for the moment, here we are still under enhancement definition and requirements review. And this is the last element, ESA element, to be launched by the end of 2027. And I think that was the last few graphs that I had. Maybe next, but I think that was the last one. Yeah, that was the last one. So thanks, Sean, and thanks everybody for giving us a chance to discuss a little bit the ESA contributions to the gateway.
Thank you, Frank. Certainly a lot going on in ESA as well, and I appreciate the comments of taking our lessons from ISS and what we know today and building flexibility into the system for future capabilities is going to be really important for us. So thank you, Frank.
Thank you, Sean. Maybe one element that I forgot, Sean, sorry, is that of course on the Orion vehicle, ESA is also providing the service modules to the Orion vehicles, and also as part of the gateway. This is also a contribution, but okay, it was not the topic of today, but I still wanted to mention it.
It's very much looking forward to those and that first flight of ESM-1 with Orion later this year as well.
Yeah, and I understood that today or yesterday had a very successful test in the high bay at in Johnson. So really looking forward to that.
I think we all are. That's great. See, also our Canadian colleagues are working on what we'll call the third generation of the Canada arm, and a lot of progress made there and evolutions from previous. And so, Ken, can you please provide us an update?
All right, I will do that. So I'll take a second just to introduce myself, since Sean, you missed me in the intro section there. So I'll be sure to give you a hard time, possibly for the rest of your career on that. If we can bring up my slides. So my name is Ken Podwalski.
I would expect nothing less, Ken. I appreciate it.
I know you wouldn't. All right. So my name is Ken Podwalski. I'm the program manager for Canada's contribution to the Gateway program. What we'll be doing, what we're talking about here is Canadarm3, and I'd like to look at this as enabling sustainable deep space exploration. That's really a theme that we're pushing in terms of what we're looking for with this contribution. If we go to the next slide, one of the messages here, and I think this this sort of springboards on what we heard from Scott and from Frank, and the approach we're taking here. You really have to look at what we've accomplished in terms of both in terms of partnership, in terms of what we've done with the ISS, in terms of how that has expanded and how the capabilities there have grown, and we've really proven that a sustainable approach to human spaceflight can be established, and that's what we're seeking to do with Gateway. So let's go to the next slide, and we'll get straight into the approach that we're taking with Canadarm3. So, as Scott was mentioning with the PPE, they're taking kind of the generational approach here. We're doing much the same thing with the Canadarm. Nothing too novel here in our naming convention. Obviously, Canadarm3 is the third generation of the space robotics system. The key message here with this slide is that we're really building capability, and it's an experience-based kind of approach to it. So in '81, we contributed the original Canadarm to the first shuttle. 5 shuttle arms after that to equip the whole fleet. The objective there was really to be able to enable the work in the payload bay and give that worksite capability. What we moved in very quickly into was, putting crew members at the tip of the arm and really getting into safety and mission critical operations in a big way. It became a very important and useful tool on the shuttle. Now in 2001, we launched Canadarm2. And in 2008, we launched Dexter, and that was on the International Space Station, of course. That's Canada's contribution there. When we looked at that system, what we wanted to make sure there is we brought in, of course, Dexter. We brought in, a very high accuracy system capable of doing contact operations, working with smaller ORUs, on orbit replaceable units. We wanted to be able to use tools. We certainly demonstrated that with Dexter. We've actually had a host of new tools that showed up that we've had to work with Dexter. We had a system that was self-relocatable. So basically a system that could pedipulate or walk around the vehicle, get ourselves to different positions on this large vehicle, do all the things that we needed to do. And then we brought in things like force moment accommodation and such to be able to do those fine and precise operations. And then even while we deployed the system, we continued to evolve it on orbit. So in the 20 years that we've been operating on ISS now, we've actually had a host of upgrades that we brought in, just in terms of re-architecting the software, being able to do things by ground control, freeing up crew time, being able to do more critical operations, being able to do things more interactively with vehicles, free flyer capture, for example, a host of capability there. So now, as we look at Canadarm3, and we put 2026 on the chart here, that's when we expect to have Canadarm3 ready. I think we're probably looking at early 2027 for the launch, depending on how the flow of logistics vehicles goes and such. But a lot of the stuff that we want to do with Canadarm3 are based on our lessons learned here, and I think that's important. So on a vehicle like Gateway, where it's going to need to be autonomous, we want to have a system that we can deploy autonomously. So it's self-deployable is important. We proved to ourselves on ISS by virtue of being able to repair our system, doing minor repairs like changing out our own cameras. So using robots to fix robots is really the approach that was validated in what we saw with ISS. at an impetus level. With Canadarm3, we want to bring that full capability and make sure that we have a system that we can maintain in deep space and not have to bring EVAs out into that much harsher environment. You know, autonomy in terms of the planning, in terms of the operations are going to be important. ISS is a complex vehicle. The Canadarm2 is a complex robotic system. Requires a lot of overhead, a lot of work to be able to bring it together to get all the things that we do done. We want to be able to take a more simplified, more streamlined, more automated approach to that. So this is where things like AI come into play with our planning products. And then certainly as we go and evolve over time and do the operations, we expect a lot of the repeatable operations, you know, on an uncrewed vehicle are going to be able to be done by ground control and use elements of autonomy in concert with that to be able to manage this vehicle. Standard robotic interfaces is another lessons learned. On ISS, we dealt with everything that was dealt with to us. On the gateway, we want to take a more uniform approach on that. So by virtue of that, part of our contribution is to actually provide those interfaces to the partners, make sure that all the robotically compatible elements, the science and experiment payloads are going to use those interfaces. That way we can freely move those payloads and manage the outside of the vehicle as we need to do. And then I guess, you know, just in terms of enhanced situational awareness, we're going to be going pretty much to the nines in terms of different kinds of sensors. So we expect to equip the system with, you know, stereoscopy, with infrared cameras, with LiDAR. This is going to bring us, you know, inspection capabilities to the next level, and really be able to manage the vehicle autonomously without crew there and give us the best possible insight. An absolute lesson learned from ISS is every time something came up, we were starting up the robotic system and going and having a look. First look was critical there. So if we can hit the next chart here, you know, at a pictorial level, I mean, just to sort of give a description of the system, Canadarm3 is a system. It's a complement of robotic elements here. So you've got the large arm itself. You know, that's going to be very similar to the space station arm. In terms of its concept, it'll be double-ended. It'll have an end effector at each end. It'll be capable of walking around the vehicle. We would like to have more interfaces on that system so that we can actually distribute experiment payloads and elements of the system around. So you see that there's interfaces on the booms that are kind of an additional feature here. We're going to have a tool and ORU caddy. So this is going to allow us to do some of the choreography with being able to move around experiment payloads. And then also we're going to have a small arm, the exploration dexterous arm. That is going to help us with not only maintaining the arm itself, but also in our payload management, being able to handle interfaces and such. And then speaking of the interfaces, to round that out, we've got a low profile grapple fixture. So again, lessons learned from ISS to make something a little bit more manageable in terms of volume constraints, put that, you know, closer to the vehicle surface. That allows us to walk around the large arm. It also allows us to do things like position that tool caddy in different locations, stack up our tools, place them where we need them. And then we're going to have dexterous grapple fixtures. So that'll allow the small arm to handle payloads and such and experiments, etc. And then we'll have the specific interfaces that we'll use with the payloads and the experiments and our own platforms, and like with, you know, on the booms and such. And that will allow us to be able to move those payloads around as we need and as we see fit. Those payload interfaces are actually going to have accommodations to be able to do fluid transfer, to be able to do data connections, etc. So all that power, data, video, and even fluid transfer is a capability that we aim to bring to the program. And this will allow the gateway vehicle to come together in a way where we can see, we can provide for what we expect to happen or what we hope to happen, which is with the ISS, we had the benefit of a Vanguard program here in terms of a sustainable presence in low Earth orbit. I would like to see us do as a partnership the same thing in deep space, where we can set up an infrastructure and we can build on that. And part of the general approach here in what we're doing with the Canadarm3 is we want to make sure that we accommodate everything that we can in terms of capability. Robotics is going to be important in terms of flexibility, in terms of that sustainability, in terms of being able to grow the vehicle, in terms of being able to go in the directions that we want to go. So that's forefront of how we put together the requirements for the robotic system. So I'll go to my last slide here. And I'll use this just as my get off the stage slide, and folks can read through this. So we talked about the large arm. We talked about some of the tools that we'll be using for that. We talked about the small arm and its fit there. You know, important to note is we want to be able to work with the gateway airlock eventual provider on that is in work. And what we expect to be there is we actually want to integrate that into the overall robotic system and be able to go inside and outside of the vehicle as necessary with payloads. I talked about the interfaces, and that's just in terms of enabling all the different movement and reconfiguration that we need to be able to do on the gateway. Importantly, and this is something I didn't talk about, is the ground segment. So this is an area where we want to be able to set ourselves up in Canada to be able to run the system, do everything we need there. We want to take, very much that AI approach, enabled approach in terms of the planning things, but we also want to be able to do the integration aspects of things, work with the partners, work with new partners, being able to use robotic interfaces, do the integration there so that we've got a seamless assembly of a gateway vehicle that can evolve and can expand. And I think my last chart is my get off the stage chart. And I will leave it at that. Thank you very much.
Thanks, Ken. It's great to see that Canadarm and the evolution of it and how it's really going to help us at Gateway with limited crew times there and support that the activities as well as the science that we'll be doing there outside. So thank you very much. All right, let's move to Sally and the Halo, the other element that will be joining PP as the first pieces to launch for Gateway.
Good morning, good afternoon, everyone. Yes, my name is Sally Richardson. I am the program director for the Halo program within Northrop Grumman. I'm delighted to represent Northrop on this panel today. And I wanted to give you a little bit of an update on where we are with the Halo program. So if we could have the first slide, please. Second slide. So just first a little bit about what Halo is and what Halo does. So in conjunction with the IHAB that you just heard described by Frank, we'll be providing the temporary living quarters for 4 astronauts while they are working in cislunar space in the NRHO orbit and en route to the lunar surface for the lunar sorties. So we provide payload accommodations, both internal and external payloads, the robotic interfaces that you just heard about from Ken, and also the two-way power and thermal control coupled with the PPE. We'll also be providing environmental control and life support systems for the crew and consumables for up to 30 days for the crew in that temporary living environment. We also serve as a hub, and as Frank mentioned, we have 3 docking ports where we will be able to host the visiting vehicles, which would include Orion, HLS, and the Gateway resupply vehicle. We also host the ESA's lunar communication system, which you also just heard about. And then we also facilitate the refueling of the power and propulsion element. So I think you heard from Scott that we will be co-manifesting both PPE and Halo in a single launch on a Falcon Heavy rocket. And we will be using the electric propulsion system from the power propulsion element to transport that combined vehicle out to NRHO. So next slide, please. So just a little bit on our progress to date. So we signed our contract for Halo back in July of 2019. And since then, we have gone through a number of major milestone reviews, including a PDR that we held in October of last year and that we closed out in the spring of this year. I did just want to show the amazing progress we've done in terms of hardware development. And what you see here is from our partners at Thales Alenia, where we started with forgings that were received in Italy back in August of last year, so only a year ago. And we are now in the process of finalizing the welds. And as you can see on the bottom right, we have 4 of the panels that have already been assembled for that pressurized module that will be used as the habitation module for Halo. One of the reasons that we were able to make such tremendous development on this program is that we are utilizing the product line from our flight proven Cygnus heritage. So we've just completed 15 cargo resupply missions using the Cygnus product line. And with this design, we were able to take that as a starting point and enhance that for use as the element of the gateway. So next slide, please. So this provides the latest CAD design that we have. So on the left, you see an exterior view of the HALO module, which includes on the very furthest most left, the inter-element adapter that would attach to the PPE, not shown in this picture. And then on the right, you see an interior view, which is where the crew will conduct their research and experiments. And that, coupled with the Orion vehicle and other visiting vehicles, will provide all the capabilities that are needed for up to 30 days for all the initial lunar sorties. Of course, over time, as Frank mentioned, the IHAB will join the Gateway stack, and that will enhance the duration of the crew stays and provide additional capabilities. But what we will be offering with PPE and HALO in the early time frame will be this initial capability to allow those first HLS missions to the moon. Next slide, please. So in summary, we are designing the HALO system, all of the systems on HALO for a 15-year life. We do, as was mentioned by the prior speakers, we do have the capability for maintenance and upgrades during that 15-year life, and potentially to be able to expand the lifetime of the HALO module. And as was mentioned earlier, it's not known at this point what uses the Gateway will have, and so we have the ability to make those upgrades and updates throughout the life of the program. One of the biggest challenges in the NRHO orbit that we have is, and it's a challenge and a benefit, is really understanding the radiation and thermal environment in cislunar space. This will be particularly beneficial for all of the future deep space missions that we have. So we plan to use the Gateway as an outpost for conducting that research and enabling us to develop technologies that will be used in future deep space missions to Mars and beyond. So as a final takeaway, Northrop Grumman and the NASA team are absolutely proud and delighted to serve as the hub of Gateway, the initial hub that is. We did just sign our full-scale development contract with NASA, which includes the completion of the HALO development and also the integration, as you heard earlier, of the PPE with HALO for that CMV launch on a Falcon Heavy. So with that, I think that is my last slide. Back to you, Sean. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Sally. And as I said earlier, it's always great to see pictures of hardware coming together. So certainly a lot of progress that we see there, and looking forward to HALO and PPE joining up at Kennedy Space Center and launching in late 24. So let's move to Fumiya Sasui-san, our last speaker here this morning, our panelist. We've heard a lot of those components that will be in different modules, but let's hear an update from Fumiya. So let me hand it over to you.
Okay, thank you for giving me this opportunity. I'm Fumiya Tsutsui, Director of JAXA Space Exploration Center, Japanese Space Agency. I'm joining from Tsukuba, Japan now. And I feel glad to join this panel, and I'm looking forward to discussing about the Gateway program with you all. Then I'm sorry that I don't have any good chart or beautiful pictures, but so let me briefly introduce atmosphere or mood for the space exploration in Japan first. For these years, many industries in various sectors in Japan, especially who have not been involved in space business, are getting interested in this lunar surface exploration for enabling human presence sustained longer on the lunar surface. The industries who have, especially in energy, constructions, cars, foods, are joining the R&D activities to convert their mature ground-based technologies into the space applications. Since the government of Japan has decided to join this Artemis program 2 years ago, this momentum is getting very increased. For instance, as you may know, the Japanese car industries, Toyota and Honda are joining our JAXA's R&D for lunar surface mobility and energy storage as a piece of sustainable lunar surface exploration now. Then, as everyone knows, that the gateway is the first step to the lunar surface and the important piece of the space exploration beyond the LEO. Then we are very proud of joining this program by providing the environmental control life support system of the habitation module and the logistics resupply as well. Then providing such a critical functions as environment control is a very great step forward for our role, from our role in ISS program, for enabling 4 crew living in the gateway. We are going to use non-space environmental technology aiming carbon neutral. And this is another example of applying mature technology of non-space sector. We are now in the phase of industry selections, and the PDR is planned in summer next year, I think. Also, we have Japanese space sector industries have good capabilities, and we are planning to contribute in cargo resupply to the gateway, which is from the experience of the ISS program. That is my explanation. Thank you.
Thank you, Fumiya, and you're right. It's really great to see the enthusiasm across many industries in Artemis and the human exploration beyond low Earth orbit. So we're very excited to see that here in the U.S. and all around the world. So thank you for highlighting that. Let's see, before we get to some audience questions, maybe just a few for our panel here as we go through. And I'll kind of start with Ken. You know, we talked a bit about ISS and then its heritage and leading to Gateway. And of course, on ISS, it's a little different, low Earth orbit, and with the crew there 24/7. We've had crew living on ISS now for almost 21 years. But Gateway has crews visiting, and so it's a different environment for sustainable exploration. We heard a little bit about the robotic arm, but can you kind of talk to us of how we're leveraging the robotic arm to help us in that realm with the absence of a crew always there and to support sustainable exploration?
Okay, well, for sure, we've been pushing that message just in terms of having a system that can support that sustainable approach. If we could pull up my charts, I kind of have a backup chart there that I call my answer to every question chart. So between those couple of charts at the end there, I think they're on slide 7. So waiting for that to pop up for a second. But basically what this does is it just maps out in terms of capability that we're bringing to the table with the Canadarm3 system, and then what challenge it really addresses in terms of, you know, how do we tackle that. So Jim, I'm not sure if you're going to be able to get my charts back up there, starting on slide 7, or Alan. Well,
Just a little patience. It takes us a couple of minutes to go back into the system and pull them back up.
All right. Sorry if that was a surprise, Alan.
Yeah.
But basically, some of the things that I highlighted when we looked at Canadarm, the original Canadarm on the shuttle, Canadarm2, what we did on ISS, and then what we were looking at for Canadarm3. I mean, this is basically just taking that thinking down to a functional level. So if we look at that, oh, here we go. Thank you, Alan. Go to slide 7, please. So this is kind of, this was our general approach in terms of being what we call the noble contribution here, looking at everything that we could think of in terms of where the gateway may go, what we may have to deal with in terms of evolution, the lessons learned from ISS. You know, I think a couple of things came through in some of the panelists here in terms of having flexibility, in terms of looking things like partnership. I mean, I can use a great example from ISS. With ISS, I mean, our friends from Japan contributed a number of modules, an impressive number of systems. One of the areas that they moved into is bringing vehicles into low Earth orbit and docking with the ISS. Well, their initial foray into that was to go take an approach with free flyer capture. That allowed them to build that first vehicle, the HTV, bring that up to the ISS, and allowed us to do free flyer capture to actually integrate that. Now they're going to that next step where it's going to be a docking vehicle. So this is a way where we can invite partners to join the program and increase their capability. And this is in every partner's interest to be able to take that approach and do that. So that's part of why we want to keep vehicle capture kind of in the scenario here, in the current baseline for Gateway, we actually do not have that need presently identified, but we're providing for it. So that's one of the ways that we're protecting for that sustainability and that flexibility to augment the vehicle and where we go with things. Another point that I'd like to bring out is as we go and look at, and this is true for the ISS, it became critically important that we utilize the ISS for science as much as we could. Robotics played into that, but both in terms of using ground control to free up the crew to do more science, but also in terms of what the logistics capability that it brings to the table in terms of that utilization capacity. Being able to unload vehicles, bring in new experiment payloads, reposition them, even to use the arm or the robotic system to deploy those systems, and either ejecting free-flying payloads or reconfiguring payloads, using tools, etc. All these things sort of fit into the thinking here. And then, Alan, if you go to the slide 8, just to kind of round out things, this sort of gives you the total picture in terms of the different columns here. The interfaces gives us that standard capability. Autonomy is going to be a big one for us. Being able to work on an uncrewed vehicle using ground control, working with communication delays, and building in autonomy. This is stuff that we're actually deploying today on ISS. So with the mobile servicing system, Canadarm2 and Dexter, we've proven ground control. That was a step forward. The next thing is to look at autonomy. We've actually put that software update in place now and the systems and the tools to be able to use that. And we're now actually starting to do things like walking off from base point to base point using an autonomous approach. Absolutely something we want to be able to do on the Gateway. So I'm not sure if I answered all the points of your questions there, Sean, but that was kind of my broad answer to it.
Yeah, thanks, Ken. I appreciate it. It certainly shows the flexibility in looking out for the future for the unknowns that will certainly come along throughout the program. So appreciate it. Let's see, I think, Alan, we've got some questions from the audience now, so maybe it's a good time to switch to those.
All right, thank you very much, Sean. And I'll go through these pretty rapid fire. First one, Sally, this is more of a ConOps question, but I didn't see much room in the Halo module for trash storage. What's the plans for trash management? Trash management was a major ISS problem for a while.
Yes, so that's a great question. Certainly, we have a lot of experience at Northrop Grumman with trash management on the ISS. In fact, the cargo resupply vehicle, Cygnus, does the primary function, in addition to bringing up cargo, is also to dispose of trash in re-entering back into the atmosphere. We do have storage capability designed into Halo. And we certainly recognize that there will be a requirement for that storage prior to receiving the Gateway resupply vehicles, which will not come online until probably two or 3 years after we have launched the Halo and PPE modules.
Okay, so as several people have said, we're applying ISS lessons to what we're doing here, and that's great. We've got 3 or 4 questions about that kind of thing, so we'll just sum it all up there. Sean, international partners, maybe sensitive, but who cares? I haven't seen an airlock. I didn't see an airlock in anybody's view graphs. What's an airlock plan?
Yeah, so certainly an airlock is a key component of Gateway. It not only supports the crew, but also, as Ken talked about, the robotic arm and its capability to transfer either replaceable units or science inside and out. And so airlock is certainly a key component of it. You saw it on the graphic that I talked about up front. Currently, NASA is working with potential future partners for an airlock on Gateway. I can certainly tell you, like I said, Gateway, it includes an airlock. That is a key piece to it. While EVA, crew spacewalks are not something that are planned, if you will, but certainly contingencies. We do have hardware on the exterior of Gateway, as well as utilization, a bit less than ISS, but they exist. And so an airlock is certainly part of Gateway. The partnership, that is a future opportunity. Right now, we look at an airlock probably in an assembly sequence in the 2028 or so timeframe. And so we're in some preliminary discussions with potential future partners for that now.
Thank you very much. I appreciate that. Sesui-san, what what is the Japanese plans for bringing things from Kibo to Gateway? How are you moving forward with lessons from Kibo to Gateway, and what do you plan on doing as far as operations and utilization? Unmute your microphone, sir.
Yeah. I think the Kibo has many functions. Of course, Kibo is a research module, and it has many bunch of utilization equipment. And such an instrument, some of the instrument should be included in the gateway. We would like to provide, like, for example, CubeSat deployer we have in the Kibo module will be equipped. We hope to be equipped in the gateway as well. Such kind of research equipment is our expansion from the Kibo to gateway.
Thank you, sir. Frank, I'm a little confused. We've got Halo and we've got IHAB, and there seems to be a fair overlap. Can you help me understand the different, the distinguishment between the two and why we are going with two different habitation modules?
Well, first of all, both the Halo and the IHAB, I think, are too small to accommodate 4 crew members for a very long period. The Halo provides an initial capability, which is more kind of a camp out that you would say, where crew would still also stay in the Orion vehicle or somewhere else, and for limited periods of time. And it can certainly support the initial missions. But if you want to do more sustainable long-term missions, I think you need to have extra crew habitable volume. Let's remind ourselves as well that these modules are also smaller in diameter than the ones that we have at the ISS, and they're still supposed to support 4 people, 4-person crew. That is one. I think we also need stowage capability. We will need capabilities to do science. Of course, if the Halo, only the Halo would be there for long period flights with 4 crew members, there would be very little other options there to do any science or to have additional capabilities. So I think it's absolutely necessary and key that you have this flexibility to have extended volumes. As we can see in the ISS, we have enormous amount of volume in the ISS. And I think both Ken and Tsusui-san and Sean can, because they have worked also in the ISS program, know that we still don't have enough. Stowage is still a huge issue on the ISS, and we still want to do more. So volume is key in exploration, and I think that's why we absolutely need this IHAB. We also have to understand that we use as much as commonalities as possible. That's a lesson learned as well from ISS. So a lot of the systems that we will use, power distribution units and so on, other systems that are used in the Halo will also be used in the IHAB, because that will further reduce your logistics requirements. It further will reduce the number of spares that you need to store on orbit and so on. So we have taken a lot of lessons learned also
Frank,
here.
we're going to be switched off in our computer here in about 3 seconds. So thank you all very much for this. Audience, you need to switch over to our next event on your screen, and that is Technology for Surface Exploration. To my panel here, Sean, you put together a great panel. I appreciate everybody's coming forth and being so open with us, and have a nice afternoon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much, everybody.